All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Leah Sullivan. Solivan. I want to make sure I pronounce it right.
No, you did well.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks so
Welcome,
much for
Leah.
having me, Kevin. I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, and and I gotta give a shout out. Your PR gal, boy, I'll tell you what, she reached out to me on the Quoted platform, Lindsay Stevens, and Leah, she is so good at talking you up. She
Wow,
is
she's the best.
really good. And
That's great to hear.
and she because I had a listing there. I was looking for just some really great podcast guests, and she's like, Kevin, I think Leah would be a great guest for the $1 Million Relationships podcast. And she tells me a little about you, and I'm like, man, I'd love to have a conversation with Leah and get to know her a little bit. And so we got to have that
Yeah,
conversation already, and I've been really looking forward to doing the podcast interview with you, Leah.
definitely. It's going to be
So
fun. Yeah.
yes. So what we'll do is we'll just start off. I'll just ask you, what do you do and who do you serve?
That's a great question. I love that question. So what do I do? Well, my day job is as an early stage investor. I have a
Okay.
fund called Precedent VC, and I invest in pre-seed and seed technology companies across all kinds of different categories, a lot of consumer, a lot of AI, a lot of marketplaces. Um, who do I serve? I really serve the entrepreneurs out there that are looking to build their businesses. And I love partnering with teams and founders to help them get to scale. And
Uh-huh.
so, I lived that. I lived through that myself, over a decade at TaskRabbit. So it's fun being able to be the person that helps others and brings them along.
Yeah. So you mentioned test drive. Let's go back a little bit and let's just talk about your evolution as an entrepreneur and how you got here to doing what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, I started out as a math computer science major.
Okay.
And coming out of school, I graduated in 2001, which was the height of the dot-com bubble. Not the best time to be getting a engineering job, but I ended up at a startup that was bought by Lotus, and then Lotus was bought by IBM. So I
Okay.
ended up at IBM for quite a while, 8 years or so, working on Lotus Notes and Domino coding in C++ plus plus and Java. And I really enjoyed my time there. I learned a ton. I still stay in touch with my team there as well. And but I had an idea, and that idea became TaskRabbit. So
Okay.
in 2008, I quit my job at IBM and got the first version of the TaskRabbit site built. I got it launched in Boston, where I was living at the time. And then, really, over the course of the next decade, kind of continued to build and raise money. I raised about $50 million in venture capital funding,
Okay.
top tier firms like Lightspeed and Founders Fund and First Round Capital and Floodgate and others. And then in 2017, I sold the company to IKEA, the global furniture retailer.
Hmm.
And then that is when I made the jump over to the investing side full time.
Okay.
So I have spent the last almost 9 years at Fuel Capital managing three early stage funds. And then Precedent VC is my first spin out fund on my own.
Okay. Very good. Very good. And what inspires you most about the work you do and the impact that you get to make, Leah?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's really about the learning. I'm a
Mhm.
constant learner. I love digging into new technologies. I love hearing about new businesses. And so anytime I get to learn something new on a daily basis, it's just what motivates me.
Yeah, yeah. I'm with you. I love learning and like it's just making these new discoveries and just even the little nuanced stuff that
Yeah.
my buddy Joe always makes this comment about little hinges swing big doors. And he's like
Mm.
so right because like the small stuff that we discover can have such a big impact. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So what is and you can name names if you want to. You don't have to name names, but what's a result that you've helped someone get through the work that you're doing now that you're just incredibly proud of, Leah?
Well, there's so many companies I've invested in that I'm incredibly proud of. I'll
Well, then you can
mention,
name more than one if you
yeah,
want. You
I
can
know.
talk about more than one.
I can mention all kinds of companies. A couple things. I'll give you some stats here.
Okay.
Women get less than 2% of venture capital funding. I was one of them that was lucky enough to raise money, right, and sell my company. But what changes that statistic is that if you have a female funder, someone who is writing the venture capital checks, they're twice as likely to invest in a female founder.
Oh,
And so, one of the things I'm really proud of at Fuel is that when I joined, the portfolio was about 19% female founders.
okay.
And by the end of our third fund, we were almost 50-50. We were like high
Wow.
40s. And that wasn't a concerted effort. That was
Hmm.
just my network, just the way I look at things, look at deals, and the lens at which I apply. So I think that's like an overarching, um, interesting statistic and,
Yeah.
and how it played out in real life. And, my first round of funding actually Miracle at Floodgate Fund. So it took a woman to fund me, and now I'm, funding all these amazing women as well.
Mhm.
I'll mention one other company I'm really proud of, actually not led by a woman, but led by a Latino, Bismarck Lepe, who he's a serial entrepreneur. This is his third company, and it's called Me Salud Health.
Okay.
And it's an AI native platform for telehealth, but it's all through native Spanish speaking language
Okay.
users. And so, he's really providing a service to that community and to that market of, Spanish speakers only who don't have full access, to healthcare and medical care. And so that's been an amazing company to be a part of and to see the type of impact that he has been really inspiring.
Wow. Very cool. So how do you what do you look for in companies that are a right fit for you to invest in?
Yeah, I think for me, because I'm investing, often the first check-in, the earliest stages, there's
Okay.
not a lot of traction in revenue, right? And
Hmm.
so you really have to make bets based on the founder, and the early team. And so I'm really looking for founders that have that founder market fit. They have some reason, and history that has led them to that moment where they founded
Okay.
that particular company. Um, and they have a lot of conviction around what they're building. And so I'm really looking for founders that have that founder market fit. Um, Building businesses is hard. Startups are hard. Less than
Yep.
1% succeed, right? And so you have to find the people that are so passionate about what they're doing. They're just refuse to fail and they're
Yep.
going to bust through walls to make it
That's
happen.
right. Yeah. Yeah, because you know what, you're right. When people are just really passionate about what they're working on, they will do whatever is necessary. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
they will put in the hours. They
Yeah,
will, like you said, failure is not an option because they see such a need for this. And it's just like they 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 look at it, they're like, well, if I'm not going to do this, who will do this? It's got to
that's
be
right.
me who's going to
It
do
has
this.
to be.
You
It
know?
has to be.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so now we've got a little bit of context here, and people understand a little bit about who you are and what you're all about. I want to switch gears just a little bit and just kind of move into talk about some of the relationship side of this. And so, have you ever been introduced, Leah, to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this
Yeah.
topic of relationships.
Well, that is a massive question. But yes, I do. I have a few people in mind, but I think
Okay.
there's one person that really stands out
Okay.
for me, from the very beginning, and that is Scott Griffith, who, when I met him, was the CEO of Zipcar.
Okay.
You're probably familiar with Zipcar. You
Yep.
can rent cars in your neighborhood. And that was a company actually also founded in Boston, and the headquarters were in Boston. And, I did not know Scott in advance of starting TaskRabbit, but I was kind of networking and talking to anyone really who would listen to me about this idea. I was still at IBM. I had the idea, was really excited about it. And one of the women I chatted with said, "Oh, you know who would love this? My friend Scott. You should email him." And I said, "Okay." And she gave me his email. She did not tell me he was the CEO of Zipcar.
Okay.
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 I still have the email. And I sent Scott a cold email on like a Saturday night after I was out for dinner with friends. And I said, "Oh, your friend AG mentioned that, I should reach out to you and tell you about my idea." And to his credit, he wrote back the next morning, Sunday morning, and he said, "Why don't you come by my office? It sounds really interesting." I maybe gave him a couple blurb sentence about the idea. I was still at
Mhm.
IBM, so it was not a business, it was not a product yet.
Mhm.
And so when he wrote back, I saw his email signature and I saw that he was the CEO of Zipcar. And I thought, oh my gosh, like I just cold emailed the CEO of Zipcar and he wrote me back. This is crazy. And I remember then it kind of hit me. I was like, oh, I'm really nervous. Like I've got to really nail this meeting. I really like, this is a big deal, you know? So I went by his office and I met Scott and we immediately connected. He's such a warm, thoughtful, incredibly smart person. And, long story short is he encouraged me to leave IBM. He said the exact thing he said to me was, "Leah, I think you're really onto something here. I think you should see how far you can take it." And so that kind of gave me the courage to leave IBM, see how far I could take the idea. He let me work out of the Zipcar office for the first year that we
Wow.
existed in
Wow.
Boston for free. He's like, "Here's a desk, here's a conference room, just come in and out. You
Wow.
have your own key card here." And what that did for me was far beyond just having like free office space to work out of, but he surrounded me with a team of amazing people at Zipcar. And I got to know the product managers and the engineers and the marketing folks and like kind of sit in this amazing energy and vibe that was Zipcar. And then I also got to see Scott be a CEO. I had never been a CEO before.
Okay.
And I got to see him like walk the room and hold meetings and make announcements and how he interacted with people and what people said about him when he, left the room. And I mean, he was very well respected. And so I got to see what an amazing CEO looked like
Wow.
as I was just getting started with my
Yeah.
company. And so that, like, I don't know if he actually understands how pivotal he was for
Yeah.
me and TaskRabbit from the very beginning.
Yeah. Wow. What an awesome story, Leah. And it's interesting because your friend, she told you about Scott and she didn't tell you who he was.
No.
Um, and so because your friend was like, well, you should talk to my friend Scott, and like here's his email. And so you're just like, okay, sure. And you email, and then only after the fact do you
Hmm.
find out, oh my gosh, he's the CEO of Zipcar.
Right.
And and so then there was this maybe, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a weight that all of a sudden you felt on your shoulders a little bit, when you
Hmm.
realized who Scott was. But up
Yep.
until that point, it's just a guy, Scott, that your friend knows.
Yeah,
And,
exactly. Exactly. I don't know if that was, she didn't tell me on purpose or what. I mean, I was like, how could you not tell me that fact?
uh-huh.
But she didn't. And I don't know, I don't know if I would have written a different email or less casual or longer. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I would have reacted a different way if I had known in advance. It was probably good that I didn't. It all worked out.
I this is so interesting because um, you know, I, I bring entrepreneurs together all the time, and I've been doing it for years. And I intentionally don't let them know who else is going to be joining them for that get together
Yeah.
because I don't want none of them Googling and researching each other in advance.
Yeah.
I just want them to
Yeah.
show up.
Yeah.
And And I believe that they do show up differently if they kind of know, because they're like, they see that, oh, so and so's going to be there too,
Hmm.
and but yet when you in this instance, when you just showed up, you just sent the email and said, my
Hmm.
friend told me to reach out, and of course he was wide open to it and stuff,
Yes.
and you sending the email the way you did, it got a response from him, and
Yep.
it got the response that ultimately came from, like, and look at all that came from you, just him
Yeah.
being him and you just being you.
Yeah. Showing up authentically.
Yeah,
It's hard to do that, right? But I do agree with you that if you can really show up authentically and have an authentic exchange with people, like that is just so much better
yeah,
than being, it's good to prepare, but I don't like over preparing. I think you've got to be in the moment too,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you mentioned you had a couple other people you might like to talk about. I want to make sure and give you the opportunity to, do that and honor anybody else you might want to honor too and stuff. So,
Yeah. Well, in those early days, there were a lot of people. There were a lot of people that helped. Tom Erickson is another CEO in the Boston area that joined. He was the very first person on my board, angel
okay.
investor as well. Taught me how to run a board meeting. That was great. And have stayed in touch with Tom over the years as well. And then yeah, I mean, just along the way, I think the last person I'll mention is someone who came kind of later in the journey, but was absolutely pivotal to the business and my life. And that is Stacy Brown Philpott, who I brought in as our COO.
Okay.
I think it was like 2012, maybe 2013. I'm trying to remember because I was pregnant with Amelia in 2013, and Stacy was like one of the first people I told. So it must have been like 2012 when I brought her on.
Okay.
And she completely changed the trajectory of the business and really helped us get to scale and launch new markets, particularly international markets in London. And then ultimately, I transitioned to be chair of the board, made her CEO. And so we, are still very close and we're in the trenches together for a long, long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So that's been a long-term relationship for you as well and stuff.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah. Yeah. So, what is an example of a situation where you personally, Leah, got to make a really substantial impact, maybe even in the moment, maybe it even surprised you a little bit, but you also know that would have never been possible if not for your relationship with any one of the three people that you've mentioned here. What's an example of where you were empowered like that because of a relationship like this?
I mean, I really think both with Scott and Tom, what was so empowering is that, they connected me to my first angel investors. Scott was the one that mentioned that Facebook was running an incubator program in the summer of 2009 that I applied to out here in the Bay Area. I was 28 years old, had never been on the West Coast before. It's total East Coast girl. And so, but Scott encouraged me to apply and, I was welcomed in, and that completely changed my life and my trajectory as well. And so I learned a lot, I think, in the early days about fundraising, about company building, again, how to be a leader and a great CEO.
Yeah.
But I think specifically like raising money is a skill, and it was so foreign to me. I did not even know there were investors out there that would buy into businesses. It just wasn't, I was the first in my family, like to start a company, to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't have that model or mindset. And it was a huge learning curve, but one that I definitely embraced with that support and help.
Yeah. Well, and now look at you now. Now you're able to be that person for others.
Yes,
And
exactly.
how
Yeah, no, that's
what
the
an
most fun.
awesome trajectory that's been.
Yes,
That
yes.
you had people that believed in you and invested in you, and now you get to be that person who believes in them and invests in them and stuff. That's
Yeah, yeah,
awesome. That is
it is.
awesome.
It is.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, for anybody who might be listening to this, Leah, and thinking to themselves, man, Kevin, I really I love Leah. I love who she is. I love how she shows up. You mentioned the word authentic, and that is just totally how you show up. For anybody that might be listening to this thinking to themselves, man, I might like appreciate having a conversation with her, or maybe I know somebody else that might be a good fit. Any websites, any resources we can share with folks?
Absolutely. So you can always email me. It's just
Okay.
Leah at precedent.vc. It's very
All right.
simple. But my website is leahsullivan.com. I'm on Instagram as well at Leah underscore Sullivan. So yeah, there's lots of ways to reach out. LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
I read every single email. There's a lot of them, but I've definitely connected with folks that have reached out, after hearing an interview or a message resonated, or if they feel like I can be helpful. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, and I'll make sure we include those links in with the show notes for the episode here and stuff. Leah, is there any last thing that you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
Well, I think the last thing I'll share, and Kevin, I think this is just so in line too with, the stories I just told and what you're promoting here and elevating here as well is just the idea of bringing others along. And, I have a book coming out in 27 based loosely on this podcast that I've been running called Breaking Precedent. And I think the thing that's really exciting to me about this concept of precedent is that when you break a precedent, when you set a new precedent, when you change something in a way that, sets a new standard, that means inherently that you're bringing other people along, that you've paved a new way, you've paved a new path for others. And so I've just become sort of like obsessed, not only with change, right, and making change happen, but long lasting, sustainable change that paves the way for others as well. So thanks for highlighting that. And I think that, if we all did a little bit of that in this world, it would be pretty exciting.
It would be, wouldn't it? Yeah,
Yep.
it sure would be. It sure would be.
Yep.
Well, I'll tell you, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation today. And I'm excited to get this out there and share it with folks. And I already was just kind of making a note because something you shared made me think of somebody that I'm like, oh, I'm going to ask Leah about, I might have a valuable connection for her and stuff. And
Awesome. Awesome. I love
so
it.
thank you so much, Leah.
All right. Thank you, Kevin.